What's your problem?
I'm putting $500,000 on Lucky down to win third race at Riverside.
Can't lay that off in time. Bet like that could break us.
When you're a victim of a really, really good con man, you almost feel guilty for, having been so easily conned. But that's the whole point. They're great con men. We have a whole class of people who are ultra professional con men, and they hold offices throughout the government surround us.
Get him out! Come, gotta get you out of here. Come on! But my money's in there!
There's a couple of dead guys in there, too. You can't get mixed up in that.
And the revealing of that and the exposing of it, the shutting it down is crucial. How many people in this audience believed the scam and the media to begin with, and it made sense, and now they're almost embarrassed to think that, gosh, I was that dense to even think this was okay. Granted, many in your audience never went along with it, but give room.
Another development on Saturday, New York officials revealed at a news conference here in the city that a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that. No other details were given, but the discovery prompted the FBI and police to expand the search area down in Lower Manhattan.
This is weaponized by military mechanisms against the Constitution, against the will of the people, without lawful authority. These agencies have been hijacked. That's what happened over at Homeland Security. It has to be a military investigation, not just civilian. The military must be involved. After disclosure and the first arrest, people around the world will forever mark that as the beginning of the total change, not just in America, but across the world. And people will remember this moment. Trump was invited to run, and he said it was 200 generals. That actually isn't the full, complete picture. Where did those generals come from? How did they align with each other? Under what circumstances did they come together? There's been a faithful resistance going back to that time period after World War II, where the world started to go off course. There was actually communications between Eisenhower and MacArthur to counter the infiltration to within not just the military, but the American electorate, even Hollywood, by this elitist, globalista crowd. And they saw specifically the danger by these extremely wealthy families that continued to aggregate power to themselves. An attack occurred using extremely sophisticated weapons and coordination systems that are out of the U.S. arsenal, the NATO arsenal, but it's really the U.S. arsenal in Ukraine. This attack on Russia's aircraft, they were parked, sitting ducks. This attack on their aircraft took a year of preparation, planning, coordination, training, all of the computer programming to pull this off. That puts it back in the Biden administration, if you will. So you have generals, you have spy masters, people in critical intelligence positions, and they did not let the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, the elected leader of America, know what schemes they had in mind.
Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere. Upon receiving the first preliminary hard information of this nature,
even after Trump got into office, think in terms of Kennedy with the Bay of Pigs. CIA came in the door last minute. Hey, we've got this operation we're doing. It's going to land a bunch of rebels. They're flying out of a location in Costa Rica that we have a base there. Same base we use for the drug running, Iran-Contra, by the way, between two mountains with the most dangerous snakes in the world, supposedly. Bushmaster snakes. They always travel in pairs. They would actually keep the snakes in cages and then go to put them out on the runway and have guys beating the grass to find the snakes before the planes would land. The guys in the planes, eyeballs wide as could be, saucers. Kennedy was presented with Bay of Pigs as though Eisenhower completely approved the whole thing. It had to be done. They had lots of other operations that relied on getting this operation done. Kennedy allowed it to go on. And they told him that if they ran into trouble, that he may need to have a fuller military response with B-52s to bomb areas to keep Castro from whatever. And Kennedy's like, what? I'm not getting into a war. You're not going to suck me into a war. He was not fully informed what the hell was going on. Sure enough, they get in trouble, and Kennedy, doesn't listen to the generals. And the rest was history. These people were captured and they went to prison for, decades. And that ticked off the military-industrial machine against Kennedy and set the tone for the rest of his presidency.
Ironbark reports that the SS-4 can deliver a 3-megaton nuclear weapon 1,000 miles. Our cities and military installations in the southeast, as far north as Washington, D.C., are in range of these weapons, and in the event of a launch would have only 5 minutes of warning.
5 minutes, gentlemen.
In those 5 minutes, they could kill 80 million Americans. Those missiles make a nuclear exchange more likely. And that is why I'm being such a pain in the ass about destroying them and destroying them immediately. Given your own statements about Cuba, I think a blockade or a bunch of political talk be considered by a lot of our friends and neutrals as a pretty weak response. I suspect that many of our own citizens might feel the same way. You're in a pretty bad fix, Mr. President.
What did you say?
You're in a pretty bad fix.
So maybe you haven't noticed you're in it with me.
Those goddamn Kennedys are gonna destroy this country if we don't do something about this.
Well, what about these low-level flights?
We need the flights.
They're starting in what?
An hour.
An hour. You realize what you're letting yourself in
Kenny,
for?
no, we need the flights because the minute that first missile becomes operational, we gotta go in there and destroy it.
Fair enough, but Castro's on alert, and we're flying attack planes over their sites on the deck. There's no way for them to know we're carrying cameras, not bombs.
Damn it.
Going to be shot at, plain and simple. I'm your political advisor. I'm giving you a political analysis here. This is a setup. The Chiefs want to go in. They need to redeem themselves for the Bay of Pigs. They got to go in this time. They got to do it right. They're boxing us in with these rules of engagement. If you agree to them and one of our planes gets knocked down or one of the ships won't stop for inspection, the Chiefs will have us by the balls. They want a war, Jack, and they're arranging things to get one.
So now look at Trump here in this situation. Something was planned long before he took office, starting over, a year ago. And it got down to the critical moments. Sometimes you have to read between the lines, and the obvious statement doesn't give you enough detail. Trump said he was completely unaware of a major attack on Russia. This attack is so bad that it took out, depending on how you want to run the equation, as much as 1/2 of their nuclear deterrent, their triad, air, land, sea, missiles, aircraft, submarines. We have to keep all of our bombers that can carry nuclear weapons in sight so that they can see them, so that if we're preparing to go to war, There is no sneak attack, if you will. Russia has to keep all their bombers in sight also, where we can see them from our satellites and we know they're not getting ready to, go start a nuclear war. Ukraine couldn't have done this all by themselves. They had to have NATO assistance. And a sophisticated kind of NATO assistance was American intelligence agencies, U.S. owned and controlled satellite used in some of the work up here within the NATO system. Absolutely. Could not have happened without Western assistance support all the way back to the U.S. They changed the rules a few years back and said, if they're attacked by a proxy of a nation using the proxy to attack them, but Western support, that Russia then, in their military response doctrine, considers that they are then approved to attack the origins of an attack on them and to bypass the proxy. They're not limited to Ukraine. If Western weapons and coordination, Trump should have been briefed on this. He should have been aware of it. He should have been aware of it by our own NATO partners. Our NATO partners, knowing that there was risk to the U.S., that Russia would see this as a U.S. attack, a U.S. coordinated attack, should have consulted with the president.
Just been informed our nuclear forces are at DEFCON 2.
They were limited. Mr. President, the orders were limited to our strategic forces in the continental United States. General LeMay is correct. Technically, SAC has the statutory authority.
I have the authority. I am the Commander-in-Chief of the United States, and I say when we go to war. The Joint Chiefs have just signaled our intent to escalate to the Soviets. You signaled an escalation which I had no wish to signal and which I did not approve.
Putin has stated since this happened that it is impossible that Trump wouldn't have known about this, in his opinion. Who in NATO spoke to who? Within the ranks of SES, Senior Executive Service, there was a number of people with their ties into NATO who knew this was coming and did not share that with President Trump. Let's go back to 2020. Most of your audience is very aware there was Executive Order 13848 that said that all future federal elections, within 45 days of any federal election for federal offices, that Homeland Security was to do an investigation before, during, and after to see if there was any foreign interference in the election, any federal election going forward, which of course include the 2020 presidential election. And that within 45 days of any federal election, the Director of National Intelligence over at Homeland Security, there's 17 agencies at Homeland Security, 16 that gather all the intelligence, and then the 17th, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, coordinates all of that information in one hub. And at that time, it was Mr. Radcliffe who was running, who was the head of Director of National Intelligence. 42 days after the election, 3 days before he was supposed to give his 45-day report, he said publicly in some of the news agencies that he didn't think he was going to be able to provide the report to President Trump and Congress on time concerning foreign interference, because several agency heads were not complying with the executive order and were not providing him, the Director of National Intelligence, with their intelligence reports concerning foreign interference. The Director of the FBI, the Director of the CIA, the Director of Satellite Reconnaissance, CISA, Cybersecurity, these different agency heads, they're not president. They're not even head of Homeland Security. They're just a appointed officer in a position that Congress had to agree to allow to be in that position. They decided themselves unilaterally with their own authority, we're not providing a report to Trump. And what was the basis? Because in their opinion, Trump was in office because of collusion with Russia. We had a lot of intel that showed that that was all complete fabricated bullshit. But you had directors of federal investigative agencies over at Homeland Security, which was created after a made-up event itself after 9/11. You talk about Patriot Act, et cetera, and combining all the agencies at one location. And they defied an executive order. They were insubordinate. They led an insurrection against the President of the United States and didn't provide their investigative product. They should have not voted until they had that information, whether or not there was foreign interference and what that foreign interference constituted, and whether or not it, in fact, had cooked the election in 2020. Congress certified the vote without the benefit of any intelligence from the greatest intelligence gathering machine in the history of the world over at Homeland Security. Why is that relevant to today and what just happened? Because Homeland Security and those agency heads survived into the Biden administration. They conducted a coup against the American people, allowed an election to proceed knowing there was foreign interference, which we'll hear lots more about here shortly. Knowing there was foreign interference that did have the potential and probably the likelihood of flipping the election, exactly what everybody knew, and the reason all those people showed up on January 6th, and the coup was on. That coup lasted through the Biden administration, and what you just saw with what just happened in Russia, people within the military and intelligence community did not provide a sitting president with information of an action that was of such grave consequence, attacking Russia's nuclear deterrence capability. They didn't just attack tanks. They didn't just attack personnel. They attacked the air wing of their nuclear deterrent arsenal. And that puts Putin with less options, paints him into a corner. They just moved us a step closer on the minute hand to nuclear war, where Putin has to decide if they have another attack on our missiles, which they did. They attacked their missile assembly complexes, where they also do maintenance on their nuclear missile fleet. They attacked that also. That's not as widely discussed within what just happened. Kennedy and Khrushchev, there was back channel communications both men had through unofficial parties.
You're a good man. Your brother is a good man. I assure you there are other good men. Let us hope the will of good men is enough to counter the terrible strength of this thing that was put in motion.
You know, these generals want to go to war. They want to start a war. Kennedy, in the writings, the people around Kennedy, and even his own stuff, when you understand what he was saying, he was afraid that he was going to get manipulated into presiding over World War III, that he, as a Catholic, would bear the guilt, the responsibility for the deaths of tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of people, because he would push the button.
Good morning, Mr. Zip, 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 you're surely looking fine. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust, if the candles don't get you, the Fatima's lost. Good morning, Mr. Zip, 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 with your haircut just as short as, haircut just as short as, haircut just as short as mine. Good morning, Mr. Zip, 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 with your haircut just as short as mine. Good morning, Mr. Zip, 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 you're surely looking fine. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust.
Bloodline globalista, a hidden hand behind the hidden hand. And these particular families want to keep the world at war. It benefits them.
You know, last summer I read a book, The Guns of August. I wish every man on that blockade line read that book. It's World War I. It's 13 million killed. It was all because the militaries of both alliances believed they were so highly attuned to one another's movements and dispositions, they could predict one another's intentions, but all their theories were based on the last war. And the world and technology had changed, and those lessons were no longer valid. But it was all they knew, so the orders went out, couldn't be rescinded. And your man in the field, his family at home, they couldn't even tell you the reasons why their lives are being destroyed. Here we are 50 years later. I think one of their ships resists the inspection. And we shoot out its rudder and board. They shoot down one of our planes in response. So we bomb their anti-aircraft sites in response to that. They attack Berlin. So we invade Cuba. And they fire their missiles. And we fire ours.
This is the thing that kept him awake at night. And then he was very aware that he was being cooked. We have this situation today where it's very Kennedy-esque. Just understand, Trump is being blocked. The blocks are the same groups that stopped us from getting to the truth at 2020. Who's ultimately got them on the payroll? I'm telling you, it's senior executive service. That's the monster behind the scenes that is claiming authority to do these things as though Trump is not the legitimate president. That's the fight that's on. And on the other side, the group that has the nuclear keys being run out of Cheyenne Mountain and 100 other related facilities, NORAD, are saying, no and hell no, we're not giving you the keys because you're not in charge either. That's why they were looking for the biscuit. Wow. Trump himself told you last summer, and a lot of people missed it. I told you when this first happened, the raid at Mar-a-Lago, they were looking for the biscuit. Trump himself, and people know it was for the Blue Book. It was for the stuff related to Crossfire Hurricane and other stuff. No, it wasn't. They were looking for the biscuit. They never got it when Biden was sworn in. How do we know that it was the biscuit? They searched Barron's desk and all of his video games and everything else. Trump himself said, you think I'm going to leave the nuclear codes in the possession of a teenager? Are you crazy? The people that are backing Trump at the most sensitive, highest level at the nuclear side, they're on the Trump side. This is coming like a freight train. We have the people in physical protective custody here in the United States who stole the 2020 election. All of the experts, including Democrats, by the way, they've been getting briefed steadily now, essentially out of Director of National Intelligence Office, Tulsi Gabbard. Here's a question. Did Karen Bass get into office and be holding office legitimately? What will come out in the months ahead? It is coming like a freight train. When they get here, how secure is Karen Bass's position as the legitimate mayor of Los Angeles? Even the Democrats that have been briefed on this, they don't even argue. It's so clear, decisive, no question about it. You cannot argue with what we got. So they've created these sanctuary cities and protected the people in office in those areas. We see some of the most extensive fraud within the vote of all, very consistent. They have the most to lose as we get into the election integrity issues and the theft of multiple elections, putting people into power and holding them there. They're going to have a harder and harder time saying that what they're doing is legitimate as an act of the will of the people. If their election chicanery around the world was continued only a little bit longer, we would have been locked into electronic voting systems. Vote from your cell phone. It's so convenient. And you would never be free again on this planet. You would be under some slave master's thumb from China and supporting AIs. And ultimately, those slave masters themselves are being controlled by Eurocentric monsters, bloodline globalista, a hidden hand behind the hidden hand to control the world and take us to a one world government. And along the way, to destroy, kill, murder 13 out of 14 people alive on the planet today.